This week, I want to dive into the question of why are some PMDD or PME months harder than others? This can be such an incredibly confusing experience, and it's so easy to gaslight ourselves. Even if you've been formally diagnosed with PMDD and you have like an actual doctor's note saying that this is a real experience for you, when we have these months that we feel like we coped better, we can feel like, oh, well, maybe I didn't have it, or maybe I, did this one thing and maybe things are back on track. But then we'll have months that set us back and we feel like everything that we put in place, all the progress we've made has just been stripped. And this experience can introduce so much questioning, so much self doubt, so much over analyzing and anxiety that we definitely don't need to add into the mix. And so when we're looking at good months and months that were harder, and we're trying to say like, what was different? What can I learn from this? How can I get more of those good months, right? We can definitely take into account the lifestyle and environmental factors, right? So if we have had a month or series of months that have been higher stress, maybe there's been travel, maybe there's been a breakup, maybe there's been some intense work deadlines, or maybe you've fallen off the wagon on some really helpful self-care practices. This can definitely be a big reason, because it's also important to remember that when we're thinking about our cycles, it's not even just what we did this month, but that ovulation cycle has been really developing primarily in the last 3 months. The last 90 days is what's leading up to that ovulation cycle. And so, if we've been going through a really stressful time, it's possible that that can influence our experience of our symptoms. And so this can be one factor in why sometimes these hard months don't make sense, because you're like, but this month was good. Like I did all the things. But there can be influences from a longer time period that are part of the mix. And this is where tracking your cycle can be super helpful. And when I say tracking, like, yes, having an app, knowing when your period starts, when to expect it, all of those things are great. But I think if we can create more mindful practices around checking in with our bodies, checking in with our cycles, whether that's just mindful moments throughout the day, a journal practice, or, being more consistent and adding those notes into the app, can help us to make these connections when, in the moment they feel disjointed. And when we're talking about those like environmental impacts, like definitely there's lifestyle things that are helpful here: setting boundaries, asking for help, getting back into the self-care routines and practices that genuinely support us, not in a way of forcing ourselves to do things that we think that we should be doing, but actually leaning into the practices that feel good and getting back to those. Why am I having such a bad month when I feel like I'm doing all the right things? And that's really what I want to dive in today, because this is the more kind of nuanced aspect of the variation that we can experience with these chronic hormone-related disorders. And so the first thing is recognizing that this is a chronic mental health issue, and one that I think adds in this extra challenge that we have days of reprieve. We have moments where we, feel more capable and more confident in all of those things. And so there's an even greater dissonance sometimes. But we have to think about this like chronic experience and the fact that our body stores these experiences. Our body stores them like memories. And what we know about memories and how they work is that they're not static. Each time we recall a memory, we can change that memory. We can add detail, we can add nuance, we can add tone, we can reframe, we can reinforce that story, or we can change that story. We can change how that story impacts us. And I think that this is very relevant in how we experience PMDD, because our symptoms are not static. And as they change and as they come through, they can be reinforcing beliefs that we have about ourselves, stories that we have about ourselves related to our capacity, related to how trustworthy our body is. However, we oftentimes have months that we can't explain. Like we're looking at our life, we're looking at the environmental stuff, we're looking at our sleep and our diet and movement, all the things, and we're just like, this doesn't add up. Whether or not we believe that new actions will actually translate to symptom relief, our worthiness to be in relationships and community, our ability and capacity to do meaningful jobs, things that we actually want to do, all of these experiences with our external world and our environment and in our relationships, as well as our internal experience of and our perception of PMDD and those symptoms, can compound, right? They're interacting with each other, they're influencing each other, they're changing one another. And so it's possible to have months where we're not feeling all the stories and beliefs about ourselves being triggered as strongly. And we can have months where those things are being brought to the surface in really intense ways and creating a more intense experience. And this is why a lot of times on forums, and if you talk to, individuals about their PMDD experience, they tend to say like months that they are more isolated, their PMDD is better. And why might that be the case, right? When we know isolation is so detrimental for humans, period, right? But why might it feel that way, right? When we aren't in community, we're not in relationship, or we're not coming up against other people's perception of us, we potentially have less triggers around these core held beliefs that we have about our body and its ability to function and trustworthiness and all these things that we talked about. And one way that I see this come up again and again, just to bring a more kind of practical example to this, is related to relationships. I've seen so many suggestions on forums that one of the best ways to find relief in PMDD is to live a single lifestyle, to not be in romantic relationships. That's how the symptoms are more manageable. And of course, there are plenty of people in really unhealthy relationships that will benefit from getting out of that relationship and see every area of their life improving. But there's also this real pattern that comes from this belief that because of PMDD, I can't be in a relationship, or I don't deserve someone who treats me well, that can both lead people to get into unhealthy relationships, but also to believe that they're not worthy or capable of having a healthy, meaningful relationship. And so we have this opportunity here to go deeper beyond our environment and sort of these surface level lifestyle changes or boundaries, to asking what beliefs are being triggered this month. Because so often what happens is we have a bad month and we throw ourselves into, all of the lifestyle things, right? We're changing our diet, we're working out way more or way less, or, we're like, okay, we need to cancel all of our social engagements. We need to put up stronger boundaries, and we're trying to control our environment as a way to feel safe. But when we shift this perspective of, yes, PMDD is loud. Yes, it's louder than it really needs to be. But what is it offering up? It's a magnifying glass on these deeper held beliefs about ourselves. And when we ask those deeper questions, we get to practice self-compassion, self-acceptance, and step into the deeper healing work, like inner child work and shadow work, saying what is being asked to be confronted, what's being asked to be healed. I was always in this pattern of fix my environment, control my environment, and I'll be good and I'll be safe. And this was in a perspective that was like, if I change my behavior, my results will change, my reality will change, all of those things. But what I realized and what I learned and what actually kicked off my transformation in becoming PMDD free was recognizing that I had to go deeper first. If I confronted the beliefs that led me to behave in certain ways and essentially recalled those beliefs and reframed them and changed them and rewired my relationship to myself and my body and my ability, that actually led to changes in my thoughts, changes in my behavior. And then I actually saw sustainable changes in my patterns, in my results. And through that process, I built self-trust and resilience that I can have a bad day and I can handle that. I don't have to be afraid of bad days because I trust myself to be able to be present with that experience and move through it. I don't need to resist it. I can be present, I can hold space for it, and it can be a bad day. Like, that's part of the human experience to have bad days. That's okay. But it doesn't have to become something that I am constantly living in fear or anxious about a bad day coming, or when I'm in the midst of a bad day, catastrophizing that this bad day will turn into bad weeks. And when I let go of that resistance and actually got curious about what is it that is so scary about this moment? What is it that feels so awful about this moment? And what is the belief that's tied to it? So again, bringing in this curiosity, bringing in the self-compassion and self-acceptance is where healing takes place. And so next time you're having a bad PMDD month and you're just like, okay, I know it's not that I just didn't sleep or eat enough, the basic taking care of your body things, because that is 100% relevant. If you're not giving your body its basic nutrients and its basic needs, it's going to get loud and send you all these messages reminding you to take care of it. But if you've checked those boxes and you're like, this, I don't know, why is this feeling so hard? I invite you to take this as an invitation to go a little bit deeper, ask yourself some of these why questions, and reflect on what are the beliefs being triggered here. And let me know how it goes.